everybody, Clicksocia here. Welcome to another video. In this video, I'm going to show you how to create a simple clicker game in Scratch. If you don't know what Scratch is, it's a programming language specially designed for kids aged 8 to 16, but people of all ages use Scratch. It's a block-based programming language, which means that instead of having to write code, you can just drag and drop blocks to create your program. A clicker game is just a game in which you click an object to get points. But nobody would want to just click an item for a really long time just to get points which they can't even use in real life. So clicker games usually have online leaderboards. But I don't know how to make an online leaderboard, so I'm not going to show you how to do that in this video. But I will show you how to create the basic functionalities of the game, like how to get points by clicking an object and a simple item shop in which you can buy power-ups like you getting more clicks per second and changing the appearance of the object you're clicking. So let's get right into it. By the end of the tutorial, you'll have something like this. There will be a shop feature with two different options. One of them increases the number of clicks you get per second. The other one changes the appearance of the apple. There will be a variable that keeps track of how many clicks you have. There will also be a level counter, which isn't really used for anything, but it's just there. And there will also be a reset option, which makes you reset all your scores and your power-ups. You can just click the apple, and it will increase your clicks. For the project, you can use any background you want. Just make sure that there's a place where you can see your levels and your score. And also, in this tutorial, I'm going to assume that you already know the basics of Scratch, like what to do with sprites and where all the blocks are, so let's get started with the code. The first thing you need to do is go to the stage and create this piece of code. What it does is, right when the project starts, which is right when the green flag is clicked, it will broadcast a message to all the sprites, and that message will be called start. It will tell the sprites when to start the project. Like, I could just do that with the when green flag click block, but since we have a reset functionality, that won't be of much use, so I use that thing. Now, go to the apple sprite and create this piece of code. You'll need to create two variables for that, level and your clicks. These variables record the level count and the clicks count, respectively. So this piece of code just sets the initial values of these variables right when the project starts or when the project gets reset. The rest of the code is dedicated to the appearance of the apple. So you can see that we've switched the costume to apple, set the size to 100%, set ghost effect to 0 so that it's completely visible, and we've also set the position of the apple. X and Y are both 0. And then we'll make sure that it's visible by using the show block. But now we need to be able to click the apple and actually get points by it, right? So just create this code. So whenever the apple is clicked, which is, when the sprite clicked, it changes the your clicks variable by 1. And I've also done a little click animation there, which sets the size to a bit higher and then waits a few seconds and sets the size back to the smaller size. And to actually show that it has been clicked and to give off a little bit more animation, I've used clones. So you can see the create clone of myself block there. I'll talk more about that later. Next, you'll see another piece of code, which is like if your clicks is greater than 0 and your clicks mod 10 equals 0, then broadcast level up. That code is used for the level up functionality. Every 10 clicks, you level up. I do that by using the mod block. The mod block just gives the remainder when the first value is divided by the second value. And if the your clicks value, just keeps track of the clicks, is divided by 10 and gives 0, then you'll level up. But that only happens when the sprite is clicked. So if you're using a power-up and you automatically get clicks even if you're not actually clicking it, you won't get more levels. You need to actually click the apple a bit to get levels. So that's a bit interesting. I never intended that to happen, but when I saw that the code did that, I decided to keep it. Okay, now we have the part where the cloning comes in. So there's this when I start as a clone block, which is used to tell the clone what to do. So when our clone starts,
it just sets the size to something really low and it becomes slightly transparent. We do that by using the ghost effect, and then it goes to the front layer so that it isn't hidden behind the apple. And then it just shows, and then it just flies out from the apple into a random position. So it's just a tiny little animation, and then it deletes itself. So yeah, it's just a tiny 1-second animation just for fun, and it adds a little bit of interest to just keep clicking a random apple. Now, our next piece of code right here for the apple is not to be used this early in the game. It's just something related to the rainbow apple functionality, which is a power-up you can find in the shop. When you use that rainbow apple feature, it just keeps on changing the color, and that adds a bit more interest to it. But nobody can get that while they're just starting out with clicking the apple. They'll need to get 500 clicks first to get the rainbow apple. So anyway, let's move on to our next sprite we have here, which is the shop sprite. So the shop sprite basically has just a little power-up menu, which lets you get power-ups, which just basically increases your clicks and changes the appearance of the apple. The first one increases the clicks, which is the more clicks option. I'll get to it a bit later. And the second option, just as I told you earlier, makes your apple change colors. So here we have the script, and it's pretty much the same. It just sets the initial values of that sprite. And then there's this little bit of code which is just used to add a bit of interest to it, as more or less everything in this game. Like when you hover over it with your mouse pointer, it changes the costume and gets bigger. So yeah, that's it. It doesn't really do much. The button just gets bigger when you hover over it, and it changes the color, and that's it. And then this piece of code, it is like when this sprite clicked, hide broadcast open shop, which means that when that shop sprite is clicked, it actually opens the shop, which is just a tiny little menu, and then that shop sprite hides and is replaced by a close button. The close button is a separate sprite, so we don't have anything about that right here. And the close shop is something that is broadcasted by the close button. Again, we'll talk about it later. And when the shop is closed, it will be shown again, so that the player can open the shop again when they need it. And so that is it for our shop sprite. The next sprite we have is the power-up, the click power-up. So it increases the amount of clicks you get per second. If you don't have any click power-ups, you just need to actually click the apple to get clicks. But with the click power-up, you get a certain amount of clicks each second, even if you just sit around and do nothing. So we have its code right here. And there's another variable involved, as you see here. It's called power-up, and it basically just keeps track of how many click power-ups you bought from the shop. So, for example, if you bought 1 click power-up, it adds 1 to your clicks every second. If you get 2 power-ups, which means that if you buy the click power-up twice, it adds 2 to your clicks every second, and so on, like that. The next piece of code we have here just determines how the sprite looks when the shop is open, which is when it appears first. And it just specifies the costume number, the size, and the coordinates, and whether it's shown or hidden. And of course, when it receives that the shop is closed, it will be hidden. The last chunk of code we have in the sprite is what happens when the sprite is clicked. So obviously, when the sprite is clicked, the player just buys the power-up, if the player has enough clicks already. You need to have 20 clicks from actually clicking the apple yourself to buy the power-up. This if statement checks whether you have more than 19 clicks or not. If you do, then it changes your clicks by -20, which means that it reduces 20 clicks from your clicks count. And it does a tiny bit of animation right there, which switches to a different costume so that, it can just show that you have bought it. And yeah, changes power-up by 1. And then it adds this little bit of code, which is that it forever changes your clicks, which is the clicks variable, by the amount of power-ups you bought, every 1.5 seconds. And that is it for the sprite. Our next sprite is the rainbow power-up, which just turns your apple rainbow. So of course, when the project starts, it's hidden, and then when the shop is closed, it is hidden. And then when the shop is open, there's just these values that determine how it looks. And of course, the biggest code we have here is what happens when the sprite is clicked, which means when you actually buy that power-up. So you'll need 500 clicks to buy the rainbow apple power-up. And so at the beginning, Yep, it checks whether you have more than 499 clicks. If you do, it reduces 500 from your clicks, and then as it did before with the other power-up, it does a quick little animation to show that you bought it. It broadcasts Rainbow Apple, and it hides forever. Even if you open the shop again, you can't buy the Rainbow Apple again because there's nothing more to buy. You just bought it. And the apple will be rainbow forever until you close the project or until you stop the project. Remember the when I received rainbow apple script we saw in the Apple Sprite? Yeah, that's related to this. So when this sprite broadcasts rainbow apple, the apple will start changing colors forever, or at least until the project is stopped. The next sprite we have is the close button. As usual, at the start it's hidden, and when the sprite is clicked, it's hidden and it broadcasts close shop, which makes the power-up sprites disappear. And then there's this tiny code which just describes its appearance when the shop is open, which is when it appears. Now we only have 2 sprites left. One of them is this level up sprite, which was actually added as an afterthought when I said that the game didn't have a lot of features. The entire level up feature is not really a big part of the game. It's just there because it's there. Anyway, as usual, when the project starts, it's hidden, and when it receives level up, which is, as we saw in the Apple Sprite, every 10 clicks, it changes the level by 1. It does a tiny little animation in the front of your screen, and then that's it. Now the very last sprite we have is the reset feature. So it just shows that whenever the project starts, it will be there. It just specifies how it looks. And then when the sprite is clicked, it broadcasts start. So like the stage did when the green flag was clicked, when the sprite is clicked, it broadcasts start. And if you noticed, all the sprites in here, instead of the when green flag clicked head block, have the when I receive start head block, so that all the blocks under that head block will do their function again when the reset button is clicked. For example, in the Apple, it will set the level to 0, set clicks to 0, and then will change its appearance to how it was back in the beginning. And that is it. This was a very simple tutorial, and I didn't actually tell you much in this because it was very basic, but I still hope you enjoyed it. And that is it.
And if you want to make any changes to what I've shown you in this tutorial, then of course feel free to do so. And it will be much more fun if you just try to make some changes. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, don't forget to leave a like because I usually forget to leave likes in videos, but don't forget it. And subscribe if you want to be notified when I upload new content. And remember, a clicker game is not really much fun if you just play it alone. If you want to play a clicker game, just challenge a friend to beat your high score or something else, or it won't be fun. So that's it. Bye!